Denzel Washington stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror and didn't recognize the man looking back at him. It was 3 a.m. He hadn't slept in 36 hours, and for the past 8 months he had been living as Malcolm X. But tonight was different. Tonight Denzel Washington was disappearing completely, and he was terrified he might never come back. His wife Pauletta found him there at dawn, still staring into that mirror, tears streaming down his face. "I don't know who I am anymore," he whispered. The man who would become one of Hollywood's greatest actors was about to discover that some roles don't just change your career, they can completely destroy your soul. We've all had moments where we've lost ourselves in something, a job, a relationship, a dream that consumed everything we were. But imagine deliberately erasing yourself for an entire year, becoming someone else so completely that your own family starts to fear you. That's exactly what happened to Denzel Washington when he accepted the most dangerous role of his career, Malcolm X. This isn't just a story about an actor preparing for a role. This is about a man who went so deep into character that he nearly lost everything that mattered to him. It's about the price of perfection, the cost of greatness, and how sometimes the very thing that makes you a legend can also break you into pieces. When director Spike Lee first offered Denzel the role of Malcolm X in 1991, neither of them understood what they were asking. They thought they were making a movie. What they were actually doing was conducting the most intense psychological experiment ever attempted by a Hollywood actor. But what's truly shocking is how Denzel's transformation began before he even signed the contract. 3 months before filming started, Denzel made a decision that would haunt him for years. He was going to become Malcolm X, not just play him. He started by throwing away every piece of clothing he owned. Everything. His designer suits, his casual wear, his shoes, all of it went to charity. Malcolm X wouldn't wear these things, he told a confused Pauletta, so neither will I. Next came the diet. Malcolm X had been extremely disciplined about what he put in his body, especially during his time with the Nation of Islam. Denzel began eating only what Malcolm would have eaten. Simple foods, no alcohol, no caffeine, no sugar. His friends watched in amazement as the man they knew for his infectious laugh and easy smile became increasingly serious, increasingly distant. But the real transformation started when Denzel began reading. Not just reading about Malcolm X, but reading everything Malcolm had ever read, the autobiography, every speech transcript, every letter from prison, every religious text Malcolm had studied. Denzel would spend 12 to 14 hours a day just reading, absorbing, becoming. His agent called him one afternoon for a routine check-in. "Hey Denzel, how's the prep going?" The voice that answered him was different, slower, more measured, with a slight East Coast inflection that hadn't been there before. "This is Malcolm," Denzel replied. The agent laughed, thinking it was a joke. Denzel didn't laugh back. By the time filming officially began, Pauletta Washington was living with a stranger. The morning of the first day of shooting, Pauletta woke up alone. Denzel was already gone, and he had left behind something that made her blood run cold, a note, written in handwriting that looked nothing like her husband's, that simply said, "Malcolm is ready. Denzel will return when the work is done." On set, even Spike Lee was beginning to worry. The Denzel he had hired, warm, collaborative, easy to work with, had been replaced by someone else entirely. This new person spoke with Malcolm's cadence, held his body like Malcolm, even seemed to think like Malcolm. During breaks, while other actors would joke around and relax, Denzel would sit alone, reading, praying, or simply staring into space with an intensity that made people uncomfortable. The cameraman, who had worked with Denzel before, pulled Spike aside after the 3rd week. "Boss, I don't think he's acting anymore. I think he actually believes he is Malcolm X." Spike brushed off the concern at first. Method acting was common, and total immersion could create incredible performances, but then Denzel started talking about events from Malcolm X's life as if he had personally experienced them. The breaking point came during the filming of Malcolm's pilgrimage to Mecca. For this crucial sequence, Spike had arranged to film the actual pilgrimage in Saudi Arabia. Denzel had been preparing for this moment for almost a year, studying Islamic prayer rituals, learning Arabic phrases, understanding the spiritual significance of every gesture. But when they arrived in Mecca, something happened that no one expected. Denzel went through the pilgrimage, not as an actor playing a role, but as Malcolm X experiencing it for the first time. The spiritual intensity was so overwhelming that he began speaking in Arabic for hours, praying with a devotion that had the crew questioning whether they were witnessing a performance or a genuine religious awakening. That night in his hotel room, Denzel called Pauletta. But instead of his usual "hey baby," he began the conversation with "Assalamu alaikum." He talked for an hour about his spiritual revelation, about how Malcolm's journey was becoming his journey, about how the lines between actor and character had completely disappeared. Pauletta listened to her husband of 6 years talk like a completely different person, and she made a decision that would either save their marriage or end it. "Denzel," she said, cutting him off mid-sentence, "this is your wife talking to your husband, Not Malcolm's widow talking to Malcolm. Can my husband please come back to the phone? There was silence for almost 3 minutes. When Denzel finally spoke, his voice was shaking. I don't know how. Here's where the true psychological cost of Denzel's transformation becomes clear. Back in New York, the final weeks of filming were approaching, but Denzel wasn't getting better, he was getting worse. He had lost 35 pounds. He rarely smiled. He spoke to his children in the stern, educational tone that Malcolm X had used with his own family. Even more disturbing, he had begun expressing Malcolm's political views as if they were his own deeply held beliefs. During a family dinner, their 8-year-old son John David asked his father to help him with math homework. Denzel's response was a 20-minute lecture about the importance of education and the liberation of oppressed peoples, delivered in Malcolm's speaking style. John David started crying. "I want my real daddy back," he said. Pauletta had reached her limit. That night she confronted Denzel in their bedroom. "You're scaring the children," she told him. "You're scaring me. Whatever this is, it needs to stop." Denzel looked at her with eyes that seemed to belong to someone else. "Malcolm X was murdered for speaking the truth," he said. "Do you want me to dishonor his memory by giving a shallow performance?" "I want my husband back," Pauletta replied. "Malcolm X is dead, you're not." What happened next would either save Denzel Washington's sanity or destroy it completely. Spike Lee was facing the biggest crisis of his directing career. The final scene to be shot was Malcolm's assassination. For weeks, Denzel had been preparing for this moment with an intensity that worried everyone on set. He had studied every detail of that day at the Audubon Ballroom, had read every witness account, had even visited the location repeatedly to feel Malcolm's final moments. The night before filming the assassination scene, Spike found Denzel sitting alone in the recreation of the Audubon Ballroom, in complete darkness. "What are you doing here, D?" Spike asked. "Waiting," Denzel replied without turning around. "Waiting for what?" "To die." The words sent chills down Spike's spine. This wasn't preparation anymore. This was a complete psychological break from reality. Spike made a decision that could have ruined the entire film. He called a psychiatrist. Dr. Sarah Morrison had worked with method actors before, but she had never seen anything like what she encountered when she met Denzel. He wasn't playing Malcolm X, she would later write in her case study. He was convinced he was Malcolm X's reincarnation, sent back to complete unfinished work. You haven't seen the most terrifying part of Denzel's transformation yet. The day they filmed Malcolm's assassination, something went wrong, terribly wrong. The scene called for Malcolm to be shot multiple times by assassins in the audience. Denzel, fully immersed in character, was supposed to fall forward onto the makeshift podium, but when the fake gunshots rang out, Denzel didn't fall as directed. He collapsed completely, his body convulsing, foam coming from his mouth. The set medic rushed over, thinking it was a seizure, but as they tried to help him, Denzel began speaking, not in his own voice, not even in Malcolm's voice, but in a voice none of them recognized. He was speaking in Arabic, saying words that would later be identified as Malcolm X's actual final prayers. Spike stopped filming immediately. The crew stood in stunned silence as paramedics were called. But here's the most chilling part. As the ambulance arrived, Denzel's convulsions suddenly stopped. He sat up, looked around at all the frightened faces, and asked what happened to Malcolm. He had no memory of the past hour, no memory of the seizure, the convulsions, or speaking in Arabic. In his mind, he was still waiting to film the assassination scene. At the hospital, doctors made a discovery that changed everything. The emergency room physician, Dr. Martinez, had seen stress-induced psychological episodes before, but Denzel's case was unlike anything in medical literature. Brain scans showed unusual activity in the areas associated with memory and identity formation. It was as if his brain had literally been rewiring itself to accommodate a second personality. In simple terms, Dr. Martinez explained to Pauletta, "Your husband has been so committed to becoming someone else that his brain started to believe it was actually happening. The seizure was his mind's way of rejecting his original identity." Pauletta sat in that hospital hallway for 6 hours, wondering if the man she married would ever come back. The children were with her sister, and she hadn't told them why Daddy was in the hospital. How do you explain to children that their father has forgotten who he is because he wanted to be someone else too much? When Denzel finally woke up, his first words weren't to Pauletta or about his condition. He looked at the doctor and asked, "Is the movie finished? Did we complete Malcolm's story?" That's when Dr. Martinez made a recommendation that would either save Denzel's sanity or end his career. He needs to stop filming immediately. If he continues this level of immersion, we could be looking at permanent psychological damage. But the real crisis was just beginning. Spike Lee faced an impossible choice. They had 6 weeks of filming left, including crucial scenes that only Denzel could perform. The movie had a budget of $34 million, and stopping production would bankrupt several investors. But continuing could permanently damage one of Hollywood's most promising actors. The studio executives called an emergency meeting. Warner Brothers had too much invested to walk away.
but the legal liability of continuing with an actor in psychological distress was enormous. Insurance companies were threatening to pull coverage. The press was starting to ask questions about why filming had suddenly stopped. Meanwhile, Denzel was in a psychiatric facility undergoing what Dr. Morrison called identity reconstruction therapy. The process was simple in concept but brutal in practice. They had to systematically strip away the Malcolm X personality that had taken over his psyche and rebuild Denzel Washington from the ground up. It's like performing surgery on someone's soul, Dr. Morrison explained to Pauletta. We have to kill Malcolm X without killing the parts of your husband that Malcolm was attached to. The treatment involved hypnosis, regression therapy, and something that sounds like science fiction. They had to recreate Denzel's original memories and reinforce his original personality patterns. For 3 weeks, Denzel didn't know he was an actor. He didn't remember his children's names. He didn't recognize Pauletta. Then, on a Tuesday morning that would change everything, something miraculous happened. Dr. Morrison was conducting a routine session when she decided to try something different. Instead of focusing on removing the Malcolm X personality, she asked Denzel to remember why he had wanted to become an actor in the first place. For the first time in months, Denzel's face changed. The stern intensity that had characterized him for so long softened. His voice, when he spoke, carried a familiar warmth. I wanted to tell stories, he said quietly. I wanted to help people feel less alone. Dr. Morrison felt her heart racing. This was the breakthrough they had been waiting for. And whose story were you trying to tell with Malcolm X? Malcolm's story, Denzel replied. But I lost myself in it. I forgot that telling someone's story doesn't mean becoming them. It means honoring them while staying yourself. That afternoon, for the first time in 4 months, Denzel Washington called his children by their real names. What happened next would redefine method acting forever. Denzel's recovery was slow, but it was real. With Dr. Morrison's help, he developed a new approach to character immersion, one that would later be taught in acting schools around the world. He learned to create what they called protective barriers between himself and his characters, invisible psychological walls that allowed him to access deep emotions without losing his own identity. 3 months later, Denzel returned to complete the film, but he wasn't the same actor who had started the project. He was something new, an artist who had learned to harness the power of transformation without being consumed by it. The assassination scene that had caused his breakdown was reshot with a different approach. Instead of trying to become Malcolm X, Denzel honored Malcolm X. The performance was just as powerful, but it came from a place of respect rather than possession. When Malcolm X was finally released in 1992, critics called it one of the greatest biographical performances in cinema history. Denzel was nominated for an Academy Award, but more importantly, he had survived an experience that could have destroyed him. The real impact of Denzel's journey was revealed years later. In 1997, 5 years after the film's release, Dr. Morrison published a groundbreaking study based on Denzel's case. The Washington Protocol, as it became known in psychological circles, established new guidelines for treating actors experiencing identity dissociation due to extreme method acting. The study led to the creation of mandatory psychological support systems for actors taking on intensive biographical roles. Studios were required to provide mental health resources, and directors received training on recognizing the warning signs of unhealthy character immersion. Denzel became an advocate for actor mental health, though he rarely spoke publicly about his own experience. In rare interviews, he would say only, "Some roles ask you to give everything. The challenge is making sure you have something left to give to yourself and your family when the cameras stop rolling." But the most profound change was in his approach to acting itself. Every subsequent role, from The Hurricane to Training Day to his Shakespearean performances, showed an actor who had learned to channel incredible depth without losing himself in the process. The full truth about what Denzel learned from almost losing himself is more powerful than any movie. In 2015, during a masterclass at the Actors Studio, a young method actor asked Denzel about his preparation for Malcolm X. The room fell silent. Everyone knew about the rumors, but Denzel had never publicly discussed what happened. He was quiet for a long moment, then said, "I learned that the greatest honor you can give to a character is not to become them, but to serve their story while remaining yourself. Malcolm X didn't need me to die for him. He needed me to live for him, to tell his story with truth and dignity while staying whole enough to tell many more stories." Then he shared something he had never revealed before. "During my recovery, I had a dream. I was talking to Malcolm, and he said to me, 'Brother, your job isn't to be me. Your job is to make sure my story lives on through someone strong enough to carry it.' That's when I understood that losing yourself isn't sacrifice, it's selfishness." The young actor pressed further, "But how do you access that level of truth without complete immersion?" Denzel's answer became legendary in acting circles. "You don't become the character. You invite the character to visit you, to share your soul temporarily, but you never give them the keys to your house. The true measure of Denzel's growth came 10 years later, in a way no one expected. In 2002, when Denzel won his Oscar for Training Day, his acceptance speech included a line that few people understood, but that meant everything to those who knew his story. To every actor out there struggling with a role that's asking you to give more than you have, remember that the greatest performance comes not from losing yourself, but from finding yourself in the service of something greater. Backstage after the ceremony, a reporter asked what he meant by those words. Denzel smiled, that warm, familiar smile that Pauletta had fallen in love with, and that had almost disappeared forever. Some lessons cost you everything, he said. The lucky ones get to keep their families while they're learning them. That night, as he held his Oscar, Denzel called Dr. Morrison. Thank you, he said simply. For what? She asked. For helping me remember who Denzel Washington was when Denzel Washington forgot. Today, Malcolm X stands as both Denzel's greatest achievement and his most important warning. The film is studied not just for its artistic merit, but as a case study in the psychology of performance. Acting schools around the world teach the Washington Protocol, the techniques Denzel and Dr. Morrison developed for maintaining psychological safety during intense character work. But perhaps the most important legacy of Denzel's experience is personal. John David Washington, his son, became an accomplished actor himself. When asked about his father's influence on his career, John David said, "Dad taught me that being a great actor means serving the story, not sacrificing yourself to it. He showed me that you can reach incredible depths without drowning." Pauletta Washington, in a rare interview, reflected, "That year I almost lost my husband to a character. But what I got back was a man who understood the difference between dedication and obsession, between art and self-destruction. That experience made our marriage stronger because it taught us both that no role, no matter how important, is worth losing each other." Denzel Washington's journey with Malcolm X teaches us something profound about dedication, sacrifice, and identity. In our own lives, we all face moments where we're asked to give everything to something we believe in, a career, a dream, a cause. Denzel's story reminds us that true greatness comes not from losing ourselves in what we're passionate about, but from maintaining our core identity while serving something larger than ourselves. The man who almost disappeared into Malcolm X ultimately became one of America's most respected actors, not despite his breakdown, but because of what he learned from it. He discovered that the greatest performances and the greatest lives come from people who know exactly who they are, even when they're pretending to be someone else. Maybe you're facing your own version of losing yourself in something important to you. Let Denzel's courage to come back to himself inspire you. You can be passionate, dedicated, and transformative while still remaining beautifully, authentically you. That's the real lesson Malcolm X taught Denzel Washington, and that Denzel Washington has spent the rest of his career teaching the rest of us.